Cool.
We don't have to faff about.
That's handy.
Yep.
Brilliant. Let me just take down that. Good. I've got the glasses on again.
Hipster
They've got
Tom.
like a tint to them. If the sun, I don't know why I ever said yes to this, but I went in to get my glasses and they were like, "Do you want us to get you a pair that turn into sunglasses when it's sunny, etc.?" Oh, okay.
You said yes.
I said yes.
Yeah.
Why on earth did I ever say yes? Because the slightest bit of sun, they start to transition. Like on a winter's day, and you're like, "What am I doing?"
Yeah,
This
we
is
bullied a
embarrassing.
kid in my class.
Well,
Mercilessly.
exactly.
His name was Richo, and so he just became known as Dick the pedo because
I can't tell. Like, for example, this light on my desk, I'm like, is it going to go? You know, they're going to start to transition. The sun.
Well, this guy Richard, you know, he was kind of a mate. But you know, he'd be playing football or standing around in a playground. The sun would come up, and then he'd have sunglasses.
Oh man!
So cue the endless jokes about watching kids burn.
Oh man, it's a killer. Why? Like, I just don't know why. There's moments in my life that I've regretted that have been bad moments, but there's moments that I've regretted that I've been like, what an absolute idiot. Just that I'm an idiot. Not like genuine regret, not moral regret. Just like, what a stupid decision. And so I've got, and also my other glasses, my normal pair, they got sort of bent or something by Isaac at some point. I think he just picked them up. They were left on the bedside table and got broken, and I haven't sort of got them fixed or anything. So these are my only pair of glasses. I've not got a strong prescription, but if I want to wear glasses in a public setting with the risk of them turning into sunglasses slowly as I'm having a conversation with someone, then this is my option, mate. It's not good. I need to just get some cheap pair off Glasses Direct. It's about £15 you can get a pair of glasses. I'm not joking. That's what someone told me anyway. Is it true? I believe it might be. I'm now Googling it to see. Oh, by the way, can we keep this in, because this is gold. Are you recording? We are recording.
Yeah,
this is absolute gold.
Yeah.
Should we buy a pair of glasses live on the podcast? I'm not sure we should.
Pedo Dick and Glasses Direct.
Okay, this isn't staying in, is it?
Yeah, I'll leave it in. It's fine.
Design a pair of glasses, 2 for £35.
That's not bad.
2 for 1 frames from £49. No, something's changed now. Yeah, anyway, there's lots of options. Designer frames from £69, 2 for 1. God, this is unbelievable. Good. All right,
hey man, don't let me get in the way of your
that's it. Yeah, let's talk through it. Let's just talk through it. Talk me through your thoughts.
I've got another interview tomorrow.
Have you? That's fantastic. What, for the same thing?
No. So the interview last week went all right.
Okay.
Yeah, it went okay. I think I did pretty well. Would have expected to get to the next round. I was told, 2 days. 2 days, you'll find out.
Okay.
It's now 7 days, and I've rung like 3 times, and I've been told by the increasingly frantic HR receptionist, she knows about your case, and she's still waiting on feedback. I'm just like, I am not coming to work at your school. You know, right. if that's how disorganized you guys are, you know, crazy.
Thing is, right, in the background, if you're still being considered for the job, and let's say, like, okay, so when you went, do you know if there were more interviews?
Well, this was just an online stage 1.
Stage 1. Okay, so how many stages were they saying they're going to be? 2, 3?
Yeah, 2.
Okay, 2.
Next stage will be in person.
Okay,
but
all right.
You know, when they're kind of like, yep, we'll let you know within 2 days whether we're going to invite you here. And I'm like,
that's actually, that's straightforward, relatively, isn't it?
Yeah, you're not lying to me, because that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, you'd have told me pretty much straight away, you know, bank's not interested.
Yeah.
The schools in Malaysia, by the way, have just not got back to me.
Oh, the schools in Malaysia.
So there was one school in Vietnam, I don't think the closing dates happen for that, but the Malaysian schools, it's been like a month.
Mm.
And you just get told, yeah, if you don't hear back from us, then you haven't got the job. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's the way you want to do it, but that stinks. There's just, it's just such a cheap cop out of a quick HR email. Dear Tom, thanks very much for your interest. Thanks for your application. You know, it takes minimum 30 to 45 minutes to do an application these days, unless it's like a quick apply. But they're not common. So
just you want to know, and you just cross it off, and you go, I don't have to chase you.
Yep.
I don't have to care about this anymore. Yep. It's a clear no.
Just a clean cut. Okay,
a clear no. I applied on Sunday for something, but the closing date was only today, and it was really straightforward process, which was great. Oh, I love it. It's just all the usual like personal questions. Do you want to answer the D&I diversity inclusion questions? No, I don't actually. I start doing it sometimes, and I go, actually, no, I don't want to.
This is optional.
Yeah, this is optional, and I'm gonna invoke my right to not do it. And then
I always do that whenever
CV
I get the
upload.
chance. Prefer not to say.
Prefer not to
every
say
single time.
Yeah, name. Prefer not to say.
don't know if I'm male.
CV. Prefer not to say. And you know, I didn't hear back from them, but
gosh, that's where stubbornness can get you, isn't it? So this interview tomorrow is in Switzerland. Well, the interview is online, but the job is in Switzerland, which it's kind of a dream job. But a classroom teacher at one of the most expensive schools in the world, totally by accident. Yeah. So it could be amazing. It could be a nightmare, but I think it's time to move on from where we are at the minute. Natalie feels the same. So
she's starting to feel that now. Yeah. Just out of interest, have you gone through a similar process to this before in your time in where you are now, as in applying for lots of jobs, etc.? Or feeling like it's time to move on at all?
No,
not on
really.
the same scale. Not like this.
No, this has been a progressive. It's not felt so much like a betrayal. It's just kind of, COVID was hard, man. Like COVID was just brutal.
Sure.
And actually, the irony is that forced digital transition has prepped me for online tutoring, and I've got, I kid you not, mate, a £50 an hour gig now.
Really?
Like, in my spare time. And
that's amazing.
So
language stuff.
Language stuff, That's with one of these top end tutoring companies, and they were like, "Yep, we want you straight away." So cool. It's just felt like a gradual realization that the place where I work and the people who run it do not really have my, or even arguably the students' best interest at heart. And I probably knew that 2.5, 3 years ago, but it took them to punch me in the jaw twice more for me to just think, you know what? I thought God had, and I actually, probably what's relevant is I actually ended up having a quick video call with a Brazilian, like an Americanized Brazilian friend of mine who's also an online teacher. Wise dude, man. Like, check out his YouTube channel called Joffrey the Giant. He's a wise dude. And I basically just said, look, you're from Brazil. You know all about Pentecostalism because you're from Brazil. you go to like a crack Reformed church, and yet you believe the Spirit's active. Yes and amen. Holy Spirit can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
At the same time, you also know where Pentecostalism can get really wacky and really bad. I thought I had heard from the Holy Spirit, stay here until 2030, bed down, put down roots. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Don't leave. And I'm thinking, okay, all right, let's do that. Things just don't sit right where I work at the moment, And I realized, and again, it was occurring at the same time as Natalie and I basically forcibly ended relationships with certain folks that are in the truther community, which frankly is
What community?
Truthers.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably another podcast episode.
Yeah.
But
Okay. All right, fine.
There is some kind of cultish stuff going on with that.
Okay.
But basically, they were some of the only sane people. I didn't know you yet during lockdown. They were some
no,
of the
of course,
only sane people during lockdown. Even my own family, God bless them, I love them to bits, but they just went bananas, and it was beyond reasonable. It was just like, okay, all right, this is lunacy. We don't need this, and so we've had that kind of difficult removing of relationships, or just ending, freezing out, just making distance, etc. And I realized that I was acting out of a place of fear, that I was more concerned about what the World Economic Forum and those, those monsters and swamp people in Davos,
Schwab.
what they were planning. I realized I was acting out of a place of intense fear and worry. Now they've got a game plan. Like, you can read their game plan, and it's remarkable how things are, happening at quite a pace according to, roughly according to their time plan. Sure. But I realized that means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. These people have got a plan. Yeah. Why? Because of Psalm 2 and Psalm 110. And
give us a flavor of those.
Oh, mate, Psalm 2. So, Psalm 10, 110. Sorry, guys, it's late. Psalm 110, my Lord said to my Lord, sit down at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And then Psalm 2, why do the nations rage? Why do the nations plot in vain against
the kings of the earth rise up and the rulers stand together?
And they conspire against the one that I've placed upon Zion's hill, something along those lines. But he shall...
I've got it here. Shall I read a little bit?
Yeah, please do.
The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain.
That's it. Amen.
And on from there.
And he smashes them. He smashes them with his rod, and he pounds them into dirt, basically. There is one king. Aslan rules, and the White Witch shall not overcome.
Aslan's on the move.
And I realized I was acting out of a place of fear. I was rejecting and just ignoring and not chasing down opportunities that were perfectly good opportunities. I was making do with very difficult circumstances that were causing a lot of stress for Natalie and I. And part of this conversation with my friend Joffrey was just him saying, look, brother, you might have heard a voice, but put out some fleeces and let the Holy Spirit perhaps gently redirect you to the path that he would have you go on. And if you ask him, if you honestly pray, Father, I am really stuck right now, I don't know what the right thing to do is, would you please have mercy on me and guide my steps? And so I did that, and a few doors have opened, but my prayer at the same time was, only open those doors, Lord, that you want me to walk down. So it's amusing to me that what I initially thought was an open door with this interview last week has proven to be, wedged tight. I'm not getting the feedback, I'm not getting an answer. And then out of the blue, I get this call from an extremely, to me and you and me, maybe the people listening don't know us, but Prestige really means nothing to me. It just happens to be a school with a very exciting vision. Which, if I ever get the job, I can go into more detail about. But but that's where I'm at. I've basically low-key repented of fear and acting out of being inactive out of a place of fear. And what sounded like wisdom was actually me trusting in my own wisdom. And that is the reason why we've been, I may have told you before, I think I told you in person, I've applied to like 17 jobs. I just told the headmaster, just to let you know, sir, just as a matter of courtesy, I'm looking for work elsewhere.
Okay.
And you know, I'm a firm believer in, if you're going to do something, do it. You know, go after it.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
moderation is, you know, all things in moderation, including
even moderation.
You know.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
the favorite. Sorry, just well, my favorite band quoted that in a lyric from one of their songs. Their band called Idlewild, and that exact thing. Everything in moderation, even moderation. Oh, such a catchy tune. I've got the melody in my head now. Sorry. Please carry on. I love that sort of wisdom. I don't even know. That's a modern proverb. It's not actually a proverb, is it? But it's a modern day proverb, but it rings true, I think.
There's like a little Navy SEAL scene on YouTube from one of these like Navy SEAL films in the like last 8 years, and it's like I'm not going to repeat it because I don't know and I'll get it wrong. But it's like moderation is for cowards, and I think in quite a few situations, moderation really is cowardly.
Sure. There's another strain of thought that I've come across, and it's like that idea that the negative bit about being like a jack of all trades. Like someone talked about it to me recently about the death of the specialist. Like people stopping specializing in certain things because they're almost afraid that they need to have like lots of different strings to their bow, sort of thing, rather than just being like, I'm really good at this thing and I could specialize my work in this area and I'm going to just get really good at it. Which is actually a really good and valuable thing. You can do a lot of value, bring a lot of value with that specialist.
I was going to affirm you in that, because actually there is such a thing as biblical Christian economics. It's not been taught in churches or Sunday schools or schools forever. But one of the things of the free market, which is fundamentally based upon compassion and love for your neighbour, is what you should expect is an increasing specialization. There's a great poem, not poem really, it's more of a narrative. It's called I, pencil, and it goes through this. It's an article of a guy who's basically explaining why no single human being in the world could create a pencil, because all of the know-how that's needed to create one pencil, he really goes into detail, exhaustive detail. He's like, we're looking at thousands of people with really specialist know-how. We're not just talking sawmills, we're talking people that know the precise polymers for, because we don't put lead in pencils anymore, do we? I can't even remember graphite, is it? Polymers that go into graphite, and then there's a guy that specializes in the machines that press the stuff together, and then there's a person that specializes in the wood glue, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
But the guy I got it from, who passed away in the past few years, Gary North, legendary Christian economist, he has explained in his tomes how increasing specialization is not actually a vulnerability, provided human beings that are specializing are exposed to the market.
Yeah, so and cooperating, working as teams, and
but fundamentally that they're exposed to supply and demand.
Okay. Right.
That they're not an academic with tenure who's talking about something no one's interested in. But this idea of specialization, because the more specialized you are, the more you know about something, the better you can do it, and the more you can serve your neighbor. And if you're in a free market, there's more cooperation and collaboration to work in teams, and that means that actually products get produced more cheaply, more reliably, more readily.
Yeah. Right.
So the fact that we've got amazing pencils and specialisms and specializations is actually a glorious blessing. How much could you get done if you needed to have an exhaustive knowledge of absolutely everything in your house?
Be frozen.
You'd be frozen
with the burden of knowledge that I have to acquire and
but even
continue
then,
acquiring. It's never ending. It's an infinite amount of knowledge that you'd need to kind of understand everything and all the inner workings of your own home and whatnot. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
But when you boil that down, what ends up happening is society ends up kind of subsisting at a lower technological level, because if we're not willing to accept that there's experts outside of our sphere of influence who we're reliant upon, then we have this weird localism where we're afraid of globalization. We're afraid of products from elsewhere. We're afraid of the immigrant and the stranger. And it all just seems to come in the same package. There's real utility to knowing how to fix your washing machine. And actually, often it makes financial sense to be able to fix your own stuff. I'm not railing against that. It's when people are unwilling to embrace, big global free market economics, because they're like, which, by the way, I do get if it's corporatism. If we've got cronyism and there's corporations who are basically swollen with fake credit from central governments, that's a problem. But if there's one business that is just knocking it out of the park and is exceptional at what they do, I mean, how much has Amazon revolutionized the delivery, system? They basically revolutionized the postal industry. They have made it so easy to get hold of items.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy,
to a large extent, they have their immense market share because they've been innovative. They've been led by extremely bold risk takers, and it's paid off for them. But also, they're providing a service. The better you serve and the better service that you provide in a free market, the more money you will get.
What was I going to say? And we started this, didn't we? By talking about opening doors, your prayers, specialism, thoughts on that. Something reminds me of something Judah says quite a lot. We talk about how, at this age, the age he is 6 and our others are younger. We talk a lot about how God made everything. We just talk about their simple foundational truths of Christianity. And it's amazing to talk about because you can just look everywhere around you, in your home, in your garden, outside, and you can just talk about what God's made. His glory is everywhere for us to see. And one of the interesting things that he does is we end up talking about how we are creative like God, and we like building things or whatever. And then we get into these conversations about how we got the food on our table. Maybe we've just given thanks for breakfast, and we start talking about the Weetabix or something really simple and how all the different processes that got it there. I don't know if you've read that. What's that baked beans book, the kids' book about baked beans?
I've
going
not
all
come
the way.
across that.
It's like beans on stalks, beans on legs, beans in trucks or whatever. All the different. It goes all the way through to beans on toast. It's called Beans on Toast.
Okay.
So, it shows all the different processes, and we talk about that, and then we end up talking about how. So God made this stuff, and then God makes the sun to shine and the rain to pour so that things grow. And then, but we're involved in that too, and we put his produce, what he's made, into different products or meals or etc. We invent new technologies and stuff, and we get into this really interesting conversation where you have to be careful what you say, because you're like, God's made us, but then he's also made us to reproduce stuff or reproduce children, and it's we cooperate with the things God has made. And by being made in his image, we also kind of can make new things too, and put things that he's made together. And it's just an amazing thought. It's it's one of those thoughts that you can think about every day and still be kind of wowed by.
I think it's one of the most striking examples of compassion and courageous leadership. That's probably not the right term, referring to the Almighty Father of all things, but the fact that the Father, as the ultimate creator, deigns to give his creatures status of sub-creator. That you have power and influence and authority and dominion over the world. I often think Adam and Eve were the two human beings with the most brain power. They were literally perfect human beings. And yet he was poorer than the poorest person that we can imagine today. Because he had all of this intellect, all of this potential, and yet nothing but raw materials.
So it's naming everything. Wow.
Well, not just naming things.
No, I know.
He's in a situation where he's having to create tools. He's having to create tools to create tools.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, goodness, when God proclaims that curse, the cursed be the ground for your sake. Both thorns and thistles shall it bring forth. For out of the dust we were taken, for the dust we were, for out of the dust we were taken, and to the dust we shall return. And you think, okay, creation's not cooperating with you anymore. You're going to have to wrestle and sweat and toil. And it's not just driving a plow. I cannot think of a comparable situation, because in every other situation where I found myself on my own, I have been surrounded by civilization and the terror, just the raw terror I had on Dresden train station when I arrived a day early because I was a disorganized idiot. And, you know, thank goodness I had money in my bank account. I was able to survive the night quite comfortably. But you imagine being utterly alone in the hinterlands of, like, for argument's sake, Siberia, Mongolia, you know, the Anatolians and Turkey, like a proper barren place.
Yeah.
And you're there with your wife in skins, shivering, and you just think, you're not just overcome with grief at the idiot that you have been, both of you, but especially you as the dude. You're like, why did I not step in? Because here's the crazy theological. Here's the crazy theological reality about what would have happened. Adam was a perfect man. If he'd stepped in and he'd said, Lord, my wife did this, but I will take the punishment for her, we would have had no need for Christ. Think hypothetically here. A perfect human steps in and he is saying, I will take the punishment that my wife has done. I will bear the burden. Right? I'm not trying to invite like a digi mob to just descend on me, who all speak in like 5-syllable words and everything. No, but if he'd stepped in as the perfect human being, he would have been resurrected on the spot because he was perfect. There was no such thing as death. But he didn't. And that's the point. That's the point, is that Adam didn't do that. So Adam compromised himself as well by not stepping in to protect and basically take accountability for his wife and not be passive. And that is, if you want like a fundamental leadership message of the Bible, it's lay down your lives for others, serve them. And I promise, I'm quite persuaded about that. It's an utterly pointless hypothetical question because we have the second Adam. But if the first Adam had done that and said, nail me to this tree, my wife has done a silly thing, but I will bear the blame for her, human history would have been very, very different. But, instead he didn't. And I have sat in my bed, just kind of like, wow, just kind of thinking to myself, it's impossible for me to do so, but thinking to myself, what must that have felt like? There's an angel with a sword and it's on fire, and he will cut me down. I can't go back that way. And God's
gate is shut.
That gate is shut. And the command is still the same. I have to go out and do what God told me to do. Go out and take dominion, rule the world, conquer the world, rule over it. Is
fruitful and multiply.
Be his viceroy over creation, his sub-creator, his regent in his stead. But now I have lost all of my capital. The only capital I've got is my wife and these clothes that I'm wearing so that I won't, freeze. And I actually had a conversation with some of my students today, and it was just a wonderful segue into it. But where I just asked them, imagine what it would be like, and you're going to have to pull me back out of this rabbit hole, by the way.
Okay. But, don't know where we came from anyway.
It was a German lesson about Saint Valentine. Okay, because I'm doing like festivals and traditions for Valentine's Day. Okay,
right.
And the story of Saint Valentine is just such a legend, because he basically said to the emperor, this ban that you have introduced, Caesar, on marriages, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm going to marry people in secret. He gets imprisoned and he gets ultimately executed. But whilst he's in prison, he's healing people. He's healing the blind. He's basically spreading the gospel, but also signs and wonders. He's in prison, so they ultimately execute him. And I said to the class, it came up in like a little multiple choice, that St. Valentine committed a crime. The answer is yes, he did commit a crime. But I step in and I say, okay, here's the interesting point. Did he commit a crime? And all of the class said, yes, legally. And I'm like, super. So according to the legal code of the Roman Empire at that time, whichever, it was like 272 or something, 278, when Valentine was executed, according to their legal code, yes, he had committed a crime. But then I get to say to them, if it's Rex Lex, so the king stands over the law, i.e. the law is the source of the law, finds is found in the ruler, the highest human authority, be it the pharaoh or the emperor or the czar, whatever, then ultimately there is no recourse to justice. First of all, because there is no such thing as an objective standard. It's coming from a human being. Therefore, children, those human authorities have to ascribe to themselves some form of divinity. And the second one is, if they get it wrong, and we know it's wrong because of our ethics, and we're made in the image of God, and we have a moral compass, all of us, whether we ignore it or not, and those human authorities do something wrong, like execute a guy for, giving sight to the blind and marrying people illegally, then there is no justice, because if this is all there is, and there is nothing above us but sky, and a human authority that's very powerful with the biggest stick does something immoral, but that immoral is protected by law, think Holocaust, think Pol Pot, think Trail of Tears, whatever, then there is no justice. And I was able to draw that out of a German lesson and then introduce to them, and two of them want to become lawyers. And I'm like, instead of Rex Lex, what's it supposed to be? And they went, Lex Rex. And I'm like, absolutely. The king, the emperor, the authority, the government stands below the law. And the law is above him because it comes from whom? And they were like, God. And I'm like, yeah. So was Valentine a criminal? And they were like, well, kind of. And I'm like, yeah, he was. But in his situation, was it better to be a criminal than not? And they were like,
that is cool.
So you're going to pull this rabbit feet backwards out of the rabbit hole.
I'm
going to come back to where we were.
Sit down with a rabbit and eat a raw carrot. I have no idea. I'm not going to do that. No, that.
So the link
tie it
there,
together.
The link there was that I was then basically able to say, think about a civilization where there is no ultimate authority. Every man just lives for himself, does what he wants. Think like Bear Grylls putting 10 British people on an island and basically saying, do what you want, survive for 3 months. Inevitably, what happens? Well, they set up some form of society and they ascribe rules, and they have to keep those rules, right?
Yeah.
To basically survive. And the link is that off of that, I was thinking today, what it would be like to be in a sort of Bear Grylls survival situation where, almost like a Robinson Crusoe, you arrive in a place, be it paradise, be it a hellscape, and it really doesn't matter what your S&P 500 index fund is doing, because you need to eat and you need shelter and you need a fire to keep away bandits or whatever. What it would be like is almost like a mental simulation to run decisions through that matrix, basically. That was the what would it be like to basically start a civilization 0 and try and work up.
Yeah. Nuts.
And that's why into it was worked the idea of law, justice.
Yeah.
And then with a class later on, I was talking about medieval England. It was one of my online history classes.
Okay.
And I was talking with them about, basically these people, I'm sure, would have loved to have iPhones. but you've got to think about how many steps there are
sure. Yeah.
to even turn silicon sand into a microchip. And so the pace of everything really in human history is a hockey stick exponential curve, because it takes time, even population, technology, whatever, to really take off.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, such interesting thoughts. Such interesting thoughts. I don't know where to go with it, but it reminds.
Have you ever watched those survival
Yeah, well, only way back in the day in the early noughties when I was a teenager. Shipwrecked was a program on Channel 4. Obviously, Big
the
Brother
Discovery
was one,
Channel's got a few.
Yeah, Shipwreck. Yeah, it was a big one. There's something that happens though that I don't really know about because of my life experience and my comfortable way I've lived my life. Something in the human psyche and just a survival instinct that I've not really come into contact with my survival instinct very often in life, such that you're thinking about Adam and Eve there, chucked out the garden. He knows that growing stuff's going to be really hard. She knows that having babies is now going to be hard. But they know that they need to grow some food for themselves. They know they need to have babies to grow a family, to look after this earth and multiply. That survival is dependent upon that, and they're just going, right, how are we going to do this? What am I going to use? What am I going to use my hands? What tools am I going to start to develop and make? That just the brain works in a different way when you have to rely on it to create the tools to grow the food to keep you alive. Like there's something that must happen and does happen when you're in that position. And also the whole naming things, they're given the responsibility to name stuff. They're creatively using language, presumably creating language to name trees, to name birds, to name rivers, to name.
I mean, he would have had immense brain power.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, another thing that I think of that is I could go on so many tangents.
Let's do it.
Is that God could, we talk about this, Sophie and I talk about this in our deep philosophical moments by the kettle, between nappy changes. And if you think God can't just have, this is where it gets into what do we think about Genesis? What do we think about the creation story? And God can't have just created Adam and Eve only. And this is where we don't have to go into literal, are they literal, etc., etc. But you were sort of saying, you were sort of playing out that kind of, they've been chucked out the garden, what happens next? And that's what we're just thinking through. But surely there must have been other men and women that God created. Otherwise, the foundation of it, because I can't remember I'll have to pick up Genesis in a minute. They have Cain and Abel, right?
Yep.
Don't think we've got a note of any daughters they had at that time.
I was going to raise that.
What I mean is marriage, procreation, incest. Yeah. That's where my mind's going. So my point is that surely God created other people.
I can answer that.
That's interesting for society. Yeah, you can answer it. I'm going to stop. Please answer it.
And I'm speaking from what I suppose is a literal creationist. I think Adam and Eve were the only ones because that's what the Bible says. Yeah. But you're quite right. It's supposedly a gotcha by atheists. Like, what about Cain's wife? And it's like, I think it's pretty obvious that Adam and Eve had a lot of sex, and they had a lot of kids. And we've got to remember as well that according to the Bible, they lived for hundreds, literally centuries. They lived for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Time.
Now, unless they were estranged from one another, I mean, gosh, I am not going to riff off of this because I'll get it wrong. I'll need to see the charts, but someone basically plotted the ages of the patriarchs and, the original first sort of people in Genesis. And they were like, yeah, Adam would have been alive at the same time as so-and-so. And so-and-so is alive at the time of so-and-so. And, so just because they're not mentioned anymore in the story doesn't mean they weren't kicking about doing stuff. Yeah. They were. And actually, it's in terms of the the incest, So working backwards from Moses' prohibition against marrying brothers, sisters, and first cousins, it would only make sense that if Adam and Eve were perfect, their genetic code hadn't degraded.
Okay.
So we are, again, it's late. I can't think off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I want to say less than 100 generations, maybe, removed from the start of human history, if the biblical account is true. If every single generation, now I'm probably wrong there, so please spitball
Okay.
figure.
Let's just put that one to the side.
Every generation, the human genome, the genetic code degrades, it changes, it breaks down in some cases. And that's why human beings gradually are specializing, right?
Yeah.
But it's also why earlier on you would have had human beings with like an immense amount of raw genetic potential. That's why the human race looks as different as it does today, and yet they all came from 3 people. I mean, that's genetic, as close to a genetic fact that we're able to prove. You can trace all of humanity back to 3 women. Like, that's not Christians doing that. That's science. That's just presumably secular scientists, and have said, yeah, human genetics goes back to 3 women. Okay. Those 3 women wouldn't have been Chinese, Nigerian, Scandinavian. They would have been presumably very similar, but their genetic potential was all there, such that as their ancestors spread out across and were subject to different genetic, geographic, whatever pressures, and the genetic code every generation is changing ever so slightly, then people look different, right? And as a result, Cain would have married his sister, but that wouldn't have been like a huge incest, because I mean, it's kind of abhorrent to us, but track with me here. His sister wouldn't have been, like, their kids would not have been at risk of genetic deformities or problems, because the genetic code wasn't degraded. Now, we have to believe that Moses spoke with God face to face. That's what the Bible tells us, is that Moses was in the Holy of Holies and he was speaking to God. And he was taking the promise to God, and God was telling him. Now, God told him, this is the law. Like, this has to be outlawed now. He knows.
Interesting.
In terms of, like, the biblical account doesn't really mention daughters. It just doesn't. And it doesn't mention, off the top of my head, again, it's late, I don't think it mentions every conceivable child that Adam and Eve had.
Okay. I'm just interesting. Yeah. I probably don't want to get down a like biblical exegesis route now, do we, on the podcast? But it raises a lot of interesting questions. I certainly don't think, for my part, that if God created other humans, that is not explicitly shown and explained and set out in Scripture. That, to my mind, does not whatsoever degrade the authority of Scripture at all, or the creation account.
So it's a logical impossibility, Tom, in the sense that if there were other perfect human beings at the time of Adam and Eve who weren't mentioned, who didn't eat from the tree of life, then we have a problem. Because, first of all, there's no need for a second Adam, because there would have been another human strain that was perfect.
Okay.
We have to read in a bunch because of
the kind of original generation is important. Original sin, in terms of being passed on from Adam and Eve onwards.
If he's described as the first Adam, and Christ is the second Adam, there is a sense of exclusivity there. Like, he was the covenantal figurehead for humanity.
The only it's whether or I get what you're saying. I'm just looking at I'd look at Genesis 4 when you go to bed if you have time, because it's the way it's set out with Cain and Abel, and then Cain, and as you go down, it goes through the whole Cain and Abel story. And then it kind of, verse 17, it says Cain made love to his wife and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. And then there's a whole kind of genealogy from Enoch on from there. And then you go down to verse 25 and it says Adam made love to his wife again, and she doesn't name Eve, but we know it's Eve. Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, he named him Enosh. So you're right to draw out that it's talking about the male line. The genealogy pretty much is the male line.
Is there not
although
not also a line that says they had other sons and daughters?
Where does that come somewhere else potentially? Yeah, maybe it may well do somewhere else here. Absolutely, it may well do somewhere else here.
Because I take the view with all of this that yes, there are not all of the Bible is to be taken literally. I think that's just a plain and obvious fact. The woman in Song of Solomon, her neck was not literally a watchtower made of bricks. But I do take the very simplistic heuristic that if at any point the biblical account is false, then the whole thing falls like a house of cards.
Sure.
So I'm very fierce to defend it, but I'm also very, very ready to analyze and critique it, because if it's not true, I don't want to build my life on it. And I have so far not really found any compelling reason to doubt God. And when it comes to the creation account, I get super excited because I look back and I think, this is incredible. We've now got a key to understanding genetics. We've got a key to understanding the Stone Age. That makes sense now. We've got a key to understanding migrations and the flood. What happened post-flood. Like we were at the museum in the town near us, where you and your wife went for a lovely weekend, and we went to this incredible museum that they've just built. I don't know if you've ever been in there. It's an amazing museum, and it's filled with dinosaurs, and it's all this evolutionary timeline, because the part of the world that you and I live in, there are a bunch of dinosaurs on the coastline. And I was just very I was just glorying in it. It's just amazing, the creatures that God had built. But Jacob came up to me, and he, bless him, he can't read yet. He's only 4. So he's coming to me, and I said, "Do you know what? These were swimming around the ark. These big things. You see that one over there? That land animal. Noah had a baby one of them on the ark." Jacob was just like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, when Jacob, like Adam and Eve, they were living in a world with dinosaurs. Like, I don't know why nobody in Hollywood has picked this up. It would make an incredible film."
Right.
Noah took dinosaurs on the ark.
Right.
Why is this hard to believe? They said took 2 of every land animal. That includes brachiosaurs. It includes T-Rexes, But they were babies. The average size of dinosaurs was like a dog, a small, a medium-sized dog. That was the average size, right, of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So much of what we think about dinosaurs has been formed by films and TV series. The reality is there were a few massive land animals. We've also got to reckon with the fact that pre-flood, everything was flipping huge. Like, I don't know if you've done any studies into like prehistoric land mammals, but you have got spiders that big. You've got beavers the size of a car. We've got the fossils. It's there. There was some nut job who once said, "Yeah, dinosaurs and fossils are a Smithsonian conspiracy." And I'm like, no. Billions of dead things buried in water, buried in layers, laid down by water all over the earth. This is just the evidence of the flood that we get to observe.
Just to jump in, because you mentioned something earlier, I just Genesis 5 lays out the genealogy from Adam to Noah, and so you're right. So it mentions in verse 4, pardon me. It says, after Seth was born, Seth was a son of Adam and Eve. Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. And then it goes down the male line, and basically it says, it repeats the same thing for all the other men and their wives, and it basically says so and so had lived this many years and had other sons and daughters. So we know that Adam and Eve had sons and daughters. We know they had Cain, we know they had Abel, we know they had Seth, who was kind of replaced, was granted to them in place of Abel, who suffered a righteous death, of course, at the hands of Cain, and gave a righteous and pleasing sacrifice to the Lord. Unrighteous, yeah, you could, okay, unrighteous death by the hands, yeah, okay, you can look at it 2 ways. Yeah, he was righteous. He was righteous. His death was righteous.
So was Abel
he
the first
suffered
martyr,
righteously. He was the first martyr, but Cain was unrighteous in killing him.
There we go. Yeah. Okay.
Mystery and paradox. There we go. So anyway, yeah, Genesis 5 kind of does that. So we know there's all these sons and daughters, and absolutely, because it focuses, you're right to say, on the genealogy through the male line. Therefore, we don't have lots of names of the women, names of the daughters of Adam and Eve, and whether one of those was the wife of Cain, for example. So I just wanted to come back to your point, because I wanted to give credence to everything that you just said, the possibilities that you laid out in terms of creation, in terms of who Adam and Eve's sons married, and the procreative kind of story from there on. So,
I think it's just one of those situations in the narrative where if God hasn't said something, we don't assume that nothing happened. I mean, from what you said, like was it from Seth? It was 800 years. So Adam lived 913 total. So you just do basic maths. There was 130 years there.
Yep.
We're supposed to assume that they had only 3 kids.
Right. Yeah. Sure. I'm with you.
I'm not going to go to the wall on that. I am probably going to go to the wall on like a literal 6-day creation, because again,
why not?
No, I am going to go to the wall on that.
No,
because,
I mean, I know.
Why not?
Why? I mean, why wouldn't God make it in 6 days?
There we go.
I mean, he spoke and created all these things. He spoke. His words have power.
We believe in a God of miracles.
Yeah.
And also, I have found every single argument to the contrary to be either weak, just fake, just wrong, or really contradictory with core aspects of God's character. So God can hold two contrary things at the same time. There are paradoxes in he can be a God of war and he can be a God of love at the same time, right? He can have masculine attributes and be a he, and yet he can be the source of all feminine attributes. He can want all sinners to come to him. He wants every single sinner to be saved, and yet he can also judge them to an eternity in hell righteously for their, So you're tracking with me here. So
yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the literal 6-day creation, first of all, we have to suspend our disbelief at the idea that something could happen miraculously. And we also have to reckon with the fact that God never contradicts himself. So his character is at no point positioned against itself. He can hold two things that are contrary together. But if God says there was no death prior to the fall, then we can't all of a sudden assume the gap theory and say, actually, there were millions and billions of years. There was tons of death. So God's actually lying, and try and massage that to try and fit what actually is increasingly being proven to be a really dumb theory anyway, that of macroevolution, the idea that a fish can become a philosopher. Right. Microevolution, adaptation, is beautiful. It's amazing. But that's never been, macroevolution. And I don't think any sane person who understands half of it is ever arguing that microevolution, the fact that, birds change, humans change, we adapt to our stimulus. I don't think anyone has ever said that doesn't exist.
No.
But man, creation is so beautiful. And
it is, really is.
That little conversation with Jacob in the museum and in the cafe afterwards, where I was explaining, and this is all thanks to Ken Ham at the Ark Encounter, where he was basically saying, there were dinosaurs on the Ark, and we can prove it. And here's all the logical reasons why as well. It makes sense. And it went in, and we heard no more of it for 3.5 weeks. And then I'm at work, and Jacob's like helping my wife fill the dishwasher, and it just comes out. And it was beautiful. And
that is a really nice example of just faithfully speaking out the truths and praising God, and just teaching your kids, and then letting it, and just being like patient and pleased and content with what you've done, and that they might not say loads back, but it goes in, and then you find out later that it comes out again, and they speak these truths, and they give praise to God and give speech that honors him. It's just a good like encouragement of just parenting generally, isn't it? And bringing up 100%. Your kids in the way they should go to love the Lord and know him.
It is. I'm wondering if I could take a slight tack and ask what are you able, what would you be willing to talk about with this job interview that you've applied for?
Okay, so yeah, fine. So basically I have applied, so a few things are going on in that I'm exploring being involved more with the church that we're part of, whatever that looks like on some part-time basis perhaps. Got loads to chat to you about on that another time, actually. You know the Underground Church documentary you recommended, or Underground Network?
You've watched it, have you?
No, I've not watched it yet, but I've watched some. I've been listening to some very similar types of things. Okay. Have you heard of Mission Somerset?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been watching their podcasts and listening to their podcasts. I know Ben Taylor a bit, but anyway. So they're brilliant. Anyway, really good stuff. So let's put that to the side. So exploring what it means to be faithful to God and follow Jesus, like putting my nets down and trying to be a fisher of men. On the sort of how do I use the things that I've already been doing and the skills that God's given me and experience and qualifications. Basically, I ended up applying for a job for pension wise. So basically just kind of using the knowledge I've got to help people and educate them. So a different tack on kind of not financial advice. It's almost like a step down, really. But what it would be doing is telephone appointments and probably some web chat even, but basically just telephone consultations with members of the public who need and want to know more about their pension and what they can do with it and their options, and basically educating and empowering them to make their own decisions in retirement and how they access their pension. So it would be a remote role. It looks like it's available from like part-time to full-time, probably with some training in an office somewhere too. So that's what I applied for on Sunday, because it was one of the first things I got to, and I found that there's part-time availability for it, home working, which is great, but also I got excited when I chatted to Sophie about it. I was like, I found a job, Soph, and I'm excited about this job. I would be able to help people, and I could bring a lot of experience. And do you know what? There's probably a lot more I could do than that, the level of that job in that organization. But sometimes you just got to get in somewhere.
Yeah, I promise it'll come. It's like Joseph, if you're willing and you've got the skills.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe not CEO, but
no. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of
yeah, great.
Yeah, so there's a few. So I'll wait to hear back from them. But that's actually the first formal job application I've made since handing in my notice the end of November. So
Amazing.
obviously Ben, there's been loads of processing with you and other people since then, processing and praying and talking and thinking and exploring stuff. And there have been other things I'm exploring, but not in like a formal job interview sort of way. But it's the first formal job application I've put in. And I've got a month to go now till I finish at LV, till I finish at my workplace. I'm now on the lookout. I'm now on the lookout in terms of part-time stuff, flexible as possible, using the skills I've got in the kind of broad industry that I'm in. And generally, it has to have some possibility of being part-time, so that I can fit in and do the other things that I feel called to do and want to step into and pray into.
Have you got any more thoughts to share on that second bit, or
no, not really? No, we could do another. We could do another time, because some of it's no, not yet. No, definitely we can do another time chatting about that, and we can go through that a bit. But yeah. So yeah, I'd love to chat to you more about it, whether online or offline.
Cool.
But Sunday was really good. I'll try and explain this in broad terms for Ben. We had a talk about 3 main things about not conforming to the world, focusing on sexuality and marriage first of all. So basically talking about same-sex marriage and not conforming to the world, and which many churches are doing, the gender ideology, and then alcohol, which actually I wasn't there for that bit. I was kind of had to pop out with the kids and Sophie, but I was there for the bit about marriage and the bit about gender ideology, and it was a bit of a heavy morning. Like Dave made some quips in his sermon, and it was like he's a funny guy. He wasn't trying to be funny, but he just had the odd quip in there, and not many people laugh because they're like, hold on, this is serious. This is like a line in the sand for people. If you don't agree with what he's saying and the church believes here, then you need to. So basically, ask a few people afterwards, what did you think? And I asked about 2 or 3 people. One couple we spoke to were like, yeah, this is brilliant, really refreshing. Like, we're totally on board. Spoke to one set of people that were like, no, this isn't what we believe, and we're honest about that. And then another, I've spoke to maybe 1 other or 2 other people as well. So it really felt like a kind of line in the sand. The church is teaching what we believe about marriage between a man and a woman, and reasons why. And there's only 2 genders. There's only ever been 2, and just simple truth taught plainly. And it did feel like a kind of line in the sand moment. And Phil, our leader of our church, got up beforehand and said, we're behind Dave in what he's going to preach this morning. It's for adults only. If you've got young kids in, that's fine, but it's going to be for kind of adults, this message sort of thing. And we want to know what you think and all this kind of stuff, but we're behind him. We're behind everything he says. So you weren't there. I wanted to relay that to you anyway, but that kind of happened on Sunday, and it's online already. He was online by Sunday evening. The talk.
So the firebombing will happen tonight.
Yeah. So effectively, I don't know. This is an interesting one. Like, will people? I sort of said, and I thought, well, there might be some people who will decide actually this isn't the place for us anymore if they were in and heard it. Because not everyone was. They're out with their kids and stuff like that. Some people. That's a possibility, of course, when you're kind of really clear about this sort of stuff.
I think part of the challenge is actually getting people to pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this guy Neil Postman, and
Neil Postman.
Yeah,
my brother.
I am not an expert on him. I've read like a chapter, but he's made some really interesting points.
Amusing ourselves to death.
Yeah, and also how the banality of communication and news. So, like the Telegraph, amazing thing, right? But it basically made most of the news just really mundane and irrelevant and pointless, like not worth your time.
Yeah.
And I think as a result, millennials, Gen Z, whatever they're called, Zoomers, like marketing is all about getting people's attention these days. That's why Andrew Tate, even though he's a total arsehole, is probably one of the most successful marketers of the 21st century so far, because he understands that it's about getting attention, and is sadly extremely successful because of it. And the challenge, therefore, I think, will be not so much having fisticuffs at coffee hour, after church. It'll be the fact that people just don't pay attention. People don't care.
So stick around, but don't pay attention. Potentially, even. Yeah.
I mean, I had. Here's me being vulnerable on the internet. I had a real emotional moment at work today. So everything with my wife and I is going really well. There's no word of a lie there. It's going very well. We have 3 kids under 5. And my wife and I live in a flats, part of my work accommodation. So we've been able to put a fair bit of money away, but we're up 4 flights of stairs. It has been a big challenge. And I find myself really exhausted, just exhausting myself and just feeling like I don't have any margin, the nature of my job, the type of the school I work at. I mean, yesterday I worked an 8-hour day in 2 4-hour shifts. And it wasn't necessarily hard work, but what it did do is it meant that I couldn't rest. I have learned so much about Shabbat, about Sabbath. I've learned so much about rest in this job. My wife and I both agreed that if God grants us this job in Switzerland, that a big part of it is going to be work-life balance. Wanting to do some form of work 6 days a week, but actually that 7th day is peanut butter, chocolate cookies, and Lego Harry Potter, right, on the Xbox. It's about resting, not necessarily like corporate institutional worship. I know we've had a conversation around that line. Doesn't mean I'm against it whatsoever, but the priority is rest. And you know me fairly well already. You know Hillsong presumably as well.
No, fill me in.
Fill me in, man. So there's this song.
Fill me in. That was Craig David reference there. Wow, I can't believe I just sang on this podcast.
So old, man. You're so old.
Please carry
Craig David. But basically, there's this song Hosanna, right, by Hillsong, and I got so much done today. Like my to-do list was probably 15, 20 individual things long, some of which were like an hour, right? And I just tanked through them, got it all done. And that was a really good feeling. I like to have some music on whilst I'm working, some instrumental music in the background, whatever, right? And by sheer chance, it turned on to this channel called, I'll butcher, can't remember the name, but it's basically really high quality short testimonies of Muslims that have become Christians.
Amazing. And
my days, those Iranian women, man. What they've gone through is just, I mean, I'm tearing up now, but I was just listening to this one woman talking about, man, I'm on a roll here.
Oh, sorry, no, go. You wouldn't think baptism is symbolic if you're an Iranian Muslim woman getting baptized, would you?
No.
Sorry, just a thought. I'm going to shut up now.
Hold that
Please
thought.
carry on. Please carry on.
And I'm listening to this initially in the background, and then I listened through it all again. And this woman was just explaining how she'd been an alcoholism, and cover your children's ears if they're watching. Molestation of children is so common in these testimonies, and wanting to kill yourself, feelings of suicide, self-harm, right? And this one was explaining how basically much of that had happened to her. And her story was basically that she couldn't feel. You know, she'd been self-harming, she'd been cutting herself, she was on drugs. I mean, it was just heavy, heavy stuff, man. Like her dad kicked her in the face when he found out she was a Christian. And I'm just in bits. I mean, these testimonies get to me every time.
Yeah.
And it was the crack that just started the deluge, because then in the playlist, the next song was Hosanna by Hillsong. And I had my classroom door shut, and thank goodness nobody walked in, because I was just having a quiet moment in the corner. I was just absolutely weeping, because at no point have I ever doubted my faith. You know, I've not been an unfaithful father or husband or servant of God. I mean, forgive me, I clearly have been. I'm a human being. I'm a sinner. You know, I will have committed sins in ignorance, but you know, at no point have I ever not tried to live my life according to, you know, the law of God, and wanting to love Jesus and run after him and pursue him as much as I can. I've just been really busy and really, really tired.
Yeah.
And this song, my goodness, that woman's voice, I don't even know her name, but there's just this one bit where she really just lifts it. And my heart, my soul, they were just singing within me, but I was weeping, you know, and I was just thinking, so many thoughts, many of which, you know, I'm not going to share now, but I basically was just thinking to myself, I love you, Jesus. I
Mm.
really love you. I don't really feel like I need to recommit anything to you because I haven't been running away from you. I've just been working.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like being given a glass of water after a walk in the desert. And it was just like the reminder that the Holy Spirit saying, I'm here. I'm with you. I love you. Reconnect with me.
Mm.
Don't just flog yourself. Actually dip in once or twice a day and just be refreshed.
Yeah. Read
And
a bit
it's
of
very,
scripture, pray, listen to a song, worship.
it's so hard in my workplace at the moment because I'm listening to Iran, and I'm like, you know what? It would be easier to be a Christian in Iran than it would be in my workplace.
Mm.
In my workplace, it's like there's just this scar tissue. There's just this hard surface around hard hearts, and you can't get to the real issues because everyone's so flipping cynical and ironic, and no one's really suffering, and you actually really are suffering, and you just can't give them the truth in the way that the Iranians are saying that you can there. I'm not planning on moving to Iran. Don't get me wrong,
No.
but it's I do remember a short anecdote about an Iranian who moved to America, and she actually moved back to Iran. When she was asked, she said the devil is singing a lullaby over the Western Church. People are asleep. It's easier to, I'd rather be a Christian under persecution, knowing that my faith is real and being tested and challenged every day, and that I'm being forced by that persecution to really focus on my relationship with Christ and who I am in Him. But my goodness, just listening to those testimonies and that one hymn, I was just like, I was just refreshed, rejuvenated.
Yeah, it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
So,
I had two thoughts. I love those stories, and I haven't heard loads of them, but I remember reading a book by Nabil Qureshi, Seeking Allah, Finding Christ. He was actually in America, so he didn't grow up in he didn't grow up in like a Muslim country like Iran in terms of that, but amazing book, Seeking Allah, Finding Christ. And hearing different testimonies either at churches we've been in or online as well. The other thing that moves me to tears like that, very similar but also quite different, would be Jewish people coming to Christ and finding that the Messiah is all over the pages of the Old Testament, and then finding that they can come and know Him, and just that those stories, because of the baggage that they've carried, Jewish people, and because of the suffering that they have had, whether and without going down a rabbit hole, how Hitler used some of the works and words of Martin Luther to justify his treatment of the Jews, and then to know that many of them have come to Christ and seen Christ in Christ in the Old Testament, and the fulfillment, the Messiah coming and seeing Him and knowing Him and coming to the cross. Those stories are equally amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean,
But again, the consequences of
Good God.
conversion for Jewish people and for Muslims are very different but similar in many ways. A song that I thought of earlier, because partly you were talking about like opening doors and asking God that He would close them, and that whole dynamic, and trusting God. And it made me think of that Isaiah 53, your ways are not my ways, your thoughts are not my thoughts, and so on. There's a really beautiful song by someone called Rita Springer. The name of the song is Worth It All. And she kind of quotes that chapter in Isaiah. And then she says, it's going to be worth it all. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it all. Like when we are there and we meet Christ face to face, it's going to be worth it all the suffering, pain and things we go through. In fact, there's a lot more, like you say, that we could step out into in faith, and that we will look back, and despite how hard those things will be, that we will look back and say it was worth it all. And then there's another song that I thought of when you were just speaking there, because I think in songs probably a lot, and it's by a guy called Andrew Peterson. He's written some beautiful songs, some congregational worship songs, some just kind of story songs. But he wrote a song that was quite important to me a few years ago called Be Kind to Yourself. and I think he wrote it with one of his kids in mind, or I think, and just with his own experiences in mind of not being great at being kind to himself and running himself out, burning himself out from work and family and stuff. And I know that what we've been talking about, I think, is almost like when you've got a young family, you're often on the edges of this burnout. But if you burn out before God, you're in the great place and your tears fall before God, then that's where you want to be. And he wrote this song called "Be Kind to Yourself," and it's a beautiful song. And it's something I occasionally listen to and go, oh, I like when I need to just remember that life can be hard sometimes, and we have to take moments to breathe and rest and think of God, and think of excellent things, as the Apostle Paul tells us to do.
I often think about
whatever is excellent, whatever is that bit, whatever is excellent, whatever is trustworthy. Think of these such things.
Think on those things. I often think of I think it was Abraham, or maybe Jacob. I think Abraham. There's just a really small passage, and it just said he went out and sat on his favorite rock in the field and meditated. And the biblical, I just pick up little really valuable nuggets as I go, because as a young Christian, I thought to myself, what, like a Buddhist? And I kind of explored what Hebrew meditation is, and it's actually the opposite of Buddhist meditation, where you empty yourself. You might empty your mind as a Hebrew meditator, but only in order that God may fill it, in order that you may contemplate and actually think on the good, the true, and the beautiful that you just mentioned. And I've been doing that in the mornings. There's an Andrew Huberman podcast. He's a bit of like a science guy, pretty knowledgeable, and he's got this really interesting, informative podcast where he basically goes through science and research, and basically says, and these are great tips for living a better life. And they're actually genuinely helpful tips. But one of the ones that he talked about was like jet lag and waking up in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, you might have sunlight coming through your window, but that barrier of glass means that you're getting 1/50th of the luz, the light to your eyes. And so actually, even if it's a bit cold outside, just open the window and just get the sunlight on your eyes. And so our daughter, God bless her, she wakes up at 6:45, 7. So that's when I wake up. And what I do, she's, breastfeeding and in the bed. There are times where I felt more useless, but actually that's pretty close. My wife's breastfeeding quite comfortably, eyes asleep. My daughter has her eyes asleep and she's breastfeeding, and I'm just kind of ready to go, need something to do. Okay, I'll go make a coffee. And but part of my morning routine is we've got a little stool next to the window, just there. And I just open it. Even when it was like -5, I was just getting this fresh air on my face, but I just watched the sunrise. And even for just 10-15 minutes, where it goes from like inky navy blue to orange, pink, cerulean. Gosh, it's beautiful. Like a John Constable painting that God's just drawing. It's changing every 2 minutes across the sky. And he does it every morning. It's amazing. And that's
do it again.
And that's been one thing that I've been finding really helpful. But I've also realized that the best strategies are utterly pointless if I don't have any margin. If I don't have any margin, if I don't have any breathing space in the mornings, if I don't have any just extra energy to do these things, it could be the best strategy in the world, formulated by top performance experts. But if I'm on my knees already when I wake up in the morning, just not up for it, I just go into autopilot, and stuff doesn't get done. For me, the canary in the coal mine is when I can't be asked cleaning my teeth. I'm just like, I do, and I have to force myself, but that's just the one thing where I'm just like, this is the straw that's going to break the camel's back. I just cannot be asked doing that right now. I'm going to bed. And I know, okay, warning signs, probably need a day off, because A, my teeth need to get cleaned, but B, I probably need a long soak in the bath. And I probably need to read a fiction book like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or like Connor Goulden or one of George R. R. Martin's, and just lose myself in a place.
Yeah.
For the hell of it, just for fun.
Oh, yeah.
And play a video game and think about dinosaurs.
Yeah, sure. But all those books as well, like you do lose yourself, but all the books that you mentioned have virtue all through them, an adventure. Yeah. So you're losing yourself into something that is, there's so much truth, goodness, and beauty and virtue. So restorative is the word.
For sure.
Beautiful word. Beautiful word.
And I'm beginning to feel the opposite of guilty about taking a day off. Just one. I'm not slacking. But when I see the amber sign, like on the car where it comes up and it just stays on, it's not urgent, but it's there.
Not flashing,
when I see them, I just say, I think I need like an MOT. I think I just need like a service, car service.
Not just filling up at the petrol station. Yeah, got you.
Yeah. I need the platinum car wash service.
Yeah.
Tires pumped. I mean, ideally, I'd go and walk up a mountain.
I had one of those days last autumn. Yeah. I just walked. I had a day off and I just walked. It was the first day off I had in absolutely ages. And the main thing I did was walk up a hill, little hills, up a hill, down a hill, round some trees. Just kept walking. I just walked a bit more and prayed a bit more and walked again. Came home, had a cup of tea. Might have had a bath as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've come round to like this really interesting conversation about just rest and how we keep going. And
we take our
don't mess around,
merry band of listeners on
don't mess around
on a journey.
We really do.
But that's one of the things that I'm absolutely stoked about if Switzerland works, because there was this talk about mountains, man. Like that's my thing. Like some people are like, I love going to the beach. I've been to like Gran Canaria in the summer and it was all right. It was nice. The water was warm. But I tell you what beach I do enjoy is a winter beach in Northumberland. That'll do it for me. That's restorative. Rugged, cold, windy, and it just sings to me. I don't know, maybe it's my Viking blood. I'm just this is
it.
The controlled bleakness,
Yeah.
But the other thing that really, I mean, a quick story, but when we only had Jacob, our eldest, we went to, this is pre-COVID, and Elise was actually in my wife's tummy.
Okay.
And we left Jacob prearranged with my mother-in-law, Jacob's Oma, who lives in just south of Stuttgart, and we took the train down. We were recreating our first ever sort of big holiday together down on Lake Constance on Bodensee. And we took the train down and we were just like, what the hell? Let's go up the valley to this place called Blue Dens. I snagged a pretty decent Airbnb deal there, whatever. And I'm so glad we did, because that place Blue Dens has what's called a Seilbahn. I forget the name in English, but it's like a cable car.
Oh, nice.
And so it took us up from already like 800 meters, and it took us up to 1,800 meters. And the cable car's going up like that, right? And it goes up to this place called Mutterberg, and at the top of Mutterberg, there's this chalet, really great park, bike trails, hiking trails, you name it. Austria is great for that. And obviously sat down and had some pretty amazing, hearty Austrian cuisine. And we just had a little wander, like a 20-minute wander, and we just found some benches, and we got incredible sunburn because we were so high up and we hadn't considered that. But the air was so pure, and there was just the sounds of, it was like a little small holding next to this place, and the goats just with the bells, and just really gentle but pure sound of the bells as the animals were moving. And there was just nobody about. And we must have been up there for 4 hours, and we still talk about that as the most what the hell effect, restorative effect that we've ever had. And it was 4 hours. And laying aside the fact that we'd be earning pretty decent money, whatever, nice standard of living over in Switzerland, it'd be the fact that if I'm just like, honey, I just need an hour. She's like, okay, all right, which
Going up
direction
the
are you going
mountain.
with? I'm like, that way.
Up.
I'm dressed in bright orange, and or learning to ski or something like that,
sure.
and just being in the sort of habitat biome that seems to.
Can we still do this if you move to?
I hope so. Yeah.
Have they got the interwebs?
The dem interwebs do exist in Switzerland.
That was a serious question with a silly quip afterwards. Our conversations I just love these conversations. They're brilliant. I really do.
It's probably time to bed now, I think.
I was about to say, I try and avoid wrapping up, but that was my best attempt at kind of going, I love these conversations, but also I'm like,
I'm knackered, man.
Oh. I've sung a Craig David song.
Yeah.
You've referenced Tolkien. I didn't meant to pick up on that. Sub creators. We've talked about a heck of a lot, man. We've gone on we've maybe even gone round some Oxbow Lakes tonight. As well.
I mean, creativity is one of those gloriously deep lakes that I love jumping in. You just,
Let's go with those wacky water analogies and illustrations for this podcast. I've mentioned an Oxbow Lake.
Free diving in the waters of creativity.
You've talked about a lake and diving in. Okay. We've done some great deep sea diving.
I think this is two tired territory after a pretty good chat. Signing off for the night. All right, mate. I'll see you soon. Okay.
God bless you, mate.
God bless you, mate. Take care.
Bye. Bye.